I think there were not many people who understood just how broad his interests were and how supportive he was of an astonishingly wide range of organisation.
A locked room, a pen, a single signature, and a decision so seismic that the people closest to the British throne went completely silent the moment it was done. King Charles didn't call a press conference. He didn't summon Parliament. He didn't even tell his own wife what he was about to do until the ink had already dried. He simply sat down, picked up his pen, and signed a document that will alter the course of the British monarchy forever. And right now, the entire United Kingdom is trying to process exactly what that means. We are talking about a confidential royal instrument, so carefully guarded that only a handful of people inside Buckingham Palace even knew it existed. A document that formally secures Catherine's place at the absolute center of the next reign, expands her authority far beyond what anyone expected, and strips Camilla of the future influence she spent decades believing she had already earned. This is not speculation. This is not a rumor circulating on social media. Fragments of this document have already escaped the palace walls, and the fallout is unlike anything the royal family has dealt with since the darkest days of the 1990s. So stay with me, because every single layer of this story is more dramatic than the last. And trust me when I tell you, by the time we reach the final meeting that took place behind closed palace doors, your jaw will be on the floor. The document itself. Let's start with what we actually know about this document, because the details matter enormously here. The instrument Charles signed is described as a crown continuity framework. In plain terms, it is a confidential succession planning document that defines exactly how royal authority, household control, ceremonial influence, and public leadership will transfer from the current reign into the next. Think of it as the monarchy's internal rulebook for what comes after Charles. Now here is the critical thing you need to understand. This was not an abdication. Charles did not surrender his throne. He is still king. But what he did was arguably more powerful than a simple handover, because he decided the terms on which the next reign will begin before that reign has even arrived, and those terms are breathtaking in their scope. According to what has been confirmed, and what sources close to the palace have detailed, the document does three enormous things. First, it formally names Catherine as the central female authority of the next reign, granting her direct oversight of strategy, charitable direction, youth engagement programming, and ceremonial reform. Second, it creates a sealed annex, granting her specific powers that go well beyond traditional queen consort duties, essentially building her institutional authority before William has even taken the throne. Third, it removes Camilla from the monarchy's long-term governing structure entirely, blocking her advisors and household members from retaining influence once Charles's reign ends. Read that again. Charles signed a document that protects his son, elevates his daughter-in-law, and simultaneously dismantles the future influence of the woman he married. Can you imagine being in that room when the pen finally went down? The moment of signing. Those who were present when Charles signed describe an atmosphere that felt nothing like celebration. The private secretary was there, the constitutional advisor was there, and the king himself sat in silence for a long moment before lifting the pen. He pressed his thumb against Camilla's name on the document and asked one quiet question. Is there no other way? The constitutional advisor explained the stakes clearly, allowing the monarchy to enter a new reign, carrying two competing centers of female influence, would divide staff loyalties, confuse institutional direction, and leave Catherine's authority permanently open to challenge. William needed certainty. Catherine needed the freedom to prepare, and the institution needed clarity above everything else. Charles tightened his jaw and signed. No one celebrated. The people in that room understood exactly what had happened. One royal future had just been secured by closing another. Two sealed envelopes were prepared immediately. One traveled toward William and Catherine at Adelaide Cottage, carrying enormous duty and enormous weight. The other traveled toward Camilla, carrying proof that the man she trusted most had drawn a boundary around her future without warning her first. Catherine reads the document. When Catherine opened that envelope, she did not smile. Not even close. She had spent years earning public trust through discipline, restraint, and absolute dedication to her family and her role. She had never treated queenship as a prize. She understood it as a duty with enormous personal cost, one that would demand sacrifice from her marriage, her children, and every private corner of her life. So when she read the words formally naming her as the monarchy's future central female figure, the reaction was not triumph. It was something far more complicated. William watched her read the key sentence twice. She placed the pages on the table, stood up, and whispered something that stopped him cold. Someone is about to be deeply hurt. Think about that for a moment. Here is a woman who has just been handed one of the most significant documents in recent royal history, a document that formally secures her place beside the future king. And her first response is grief for the woman losing ground. William followed her and chose his words carefully. He told her the document was not a reward. It was protection for the institution, for their children, for a reign that could not survive divided loyalties. She turned back, visibly shaken, and said something he could not easily dismiss. Protection could still feel cruel when it was built from another person's loss. Then came the revelation that shook her even more deeply. William admitted he had been privately consulted by Charles weeks earlier. He had not written the decree, but in a recorded palace conversation preserved for the succession files, William had warned his father directly. The next reign could not function beneath two competing centers of female authority. Catherine stared at him. The decision she had only just learned about had been forming for weeks. Her husband had known. He had argued for clarity, not humiliation, he insisted. But in that moment, the difference between those two things felt painfully thin. Camilla reads the document. Now let's talk about what happened when Camilla opened her copy, because this is where the emotional weight of this story truly lands. After decades of controversy, public rejection, and an achingly slow path toward acceptance, Camilla had come to believe her place beside Charles was finally, genuinely secure. She had endured years of being the most disliked woman in Britain. She had absorbed public hostility, press cruelty, and the grief of a nation that never stopped mourning Diana. And through all of it, she had remained beside Charles, steady and loyal, until the world eventually, reluctantly came around. She believed that loyalty had earned her a future. The document told her otherwise. When she reached the removal clause, her chair scraped back so sharply it struck the wall. Her private secretary rushed in, and she folded the pages and ordered him out without a single word of explanation. Alone, she opened the document again, and beside the sealed annex, she found a handwritten notation, 2 words that told her this decree had not appeared from nowhere. After Windsor, she knew exactly what those words referred to, and in that moment, she understood that a single confrontation inside Windsor Castle had triggered everything that followed. The W in DR confrontation. So what happened at Windsor? Because this is the moment everything changed. The moment a private disagreement became a constitutional crisis Charles could no longer ignore. For months, tensions had been building beneath the surface of the royal family's carefully constructed public image. Camilla expected her household, her trusted advisors, and her ceremonial preferences to remain influential after William eventually inherited the throne. It was a reasonable expectation, she felt, a natural continuation of everything she had built alongside Charles. But William had a completely different vision for his future reign. A smaller, leaner monarchy, fewer competing voices, clear authority centered entirely around his immediate family. And Catherine had been taking on an increasingly significant role in high-level discussions about public trust, youth engagement, patronage reform, and royal communications, a role that was growing and deepening by the month. Camilla saw what was happening. She feared the palace was quietly building a parallel court around the Wales family, a separate center of advisors and influence that would gradually overshadow her while she was still standing beside the king. It all broke open during a Commonwealth reception planning meeting at Windsor. Catherine was expected to chair the Future Strategy Committee, and Camilla, with Charles and William both present, delivered the sentence that changed everything. "There cannot be 2 queens directing this family while I am still here." The room went rigid. Catherine did not argue. She closed her briefing folder, looked directly at Charles, and asked calmly whether her presence had become an obstacle. Charles hesitated. His silence lasted only seconds, but it landed like a verdict. The hurt on Catherine's face was unmistakable. The role she had accepted as a matter of duty was being characterized as an act of ambition. William pushed his chair back and told Camilla directly that Catherine's future authority was not hers to restrict. Voices rose. Charles raised a hand and ordered calm, but the damage was done. After Catherine left, Camilla urged Charles to delay transferring strategic duties to the Wales household. She warned him that William was moving too quickly, that Catherine's popularity risked overshadowing the sovereign before the reign was even complete. Charles said little, but that evening he requested the confidential succession files. He wrote 4 words across the Windsor meeting record. Continuity requires clarity. Within 48 hours, constitutional advisors were drafting the instrument that would define the next reign, and Camilla's name was on the page for the wrong reasons. When Camilla received her copy of the decree and found those 2 words, "after Windsor," she did something no advisor would have recommended. She did not call her lawyers. She did not summon her household. She carried the folded document directly to Charles, walked into the private library at Clarence House, and closed the door behind her. No aids, no softening language, no palace procedure to hide behind. Just a husband and a wife, and the truth sitting open between them on the table. She asked him the question he had been dreading most. Had he protected the crown, or had he simply chosen Catherine over her? Charles rose slowly. He kept his voice controlled, and he did something Camilla had not expected. He did not blame advisors. He did not cite constitutional requirements. He did not suggest that the outcome had been forced upon him. He told her the choice had been his alone. That honesty struck harder than any excuse could have, because it meant there was no one else to be angry at, no system to blame, no palace official who had pressured the king's hand. He had examined every option, understood the full human cost, and signed anyway. He then showed her the documented household assessment, staff receiving conflicting instructions, advisors competing for control, members of Camilla's own circle actively delaying the transfer of charitable patronages to Catherine. The institutional case had been building for months. Windsor had simply been the final trigger. Camilla asked the question she truly needed answered. Had Catherine demanded her removal? Charles answered immediately. She had not. Through a recorded private consultation, Catherine had actively urged him to avoid unnecessary humiliation. She had asked him to protect Camilla's dignity throughout the process. That truth denied Camilla the enemy she desperately needed. She could not make this Catherine's fault, because Catherine had tried to soften it. In the silence that followed, Camilla slowly removed her wedding ring and placed it beside the decree. Neither of them spoke. Then she put it back on, and she told Charles that if he had chosen the institution over their future together, he would have to explain that choice to William himself. Charles and William. The conversation between father and son happened in a smaller room at Windsor, and it was equally unsparing. William sat down but did not touch the document. He told his father immediately that he had never wanted Camilla humiliated. He had wanted certainty for Catherine, not revenge. Charles explained the institutional reasoning in full. Every month of delay had allowed rival advisors to deepen their positions, had split staff loyalties further, and had left Catherine's authority permanently open to challenge before she had even assumed it. The assessment data was overwhelming. Public confidence surveys showed Catherine's steadiness was unlike anything the palace had seen in a generation. Household evaluations described her as the strongest bridge between royal tradition and younger audiences. Commonwealth consultations had identified her as essential to the next reign's stability. William pressed him further. Had he consulted him about the full scope of Catherine's expanded powers? Charles admitted he had not. He had expanded her authority further than he had shared with William, because the data left him no other conclusion. The prince finally lifted the receipt confirming he had read the instrument. He signed it, but he made his position clear. Catherine would carry this responsibility. She would not be celebrated for another woman's loss. Charles accepted the rebuke without defense. Then, as William moved toward the door, Charles stopped him with a warning that changed the entire atmosphere of the room. Someone inside Camilla's household had copied part of the decree. Palace security believed the page was already outside royal control. William turned back, because he understood instantly what that meant. The family's most explosive private conflict was about to become a national news story. The leak. 11 words. That was all it took. The future queen shall assume undivided authority after the transition. Those 11 words, leaked to a national broadcaster through an encrypted message with the sender's identity concealed, detonated inside the British media like nothing in recent royal memory. Within minutes, editors were demanding confirmation. Royal correspondents were calling every contact they had. Palace staff were searching desperately for the missing copy. The photograph showed one paragraph of the document. Its title had been covered, but the royal seal, Charles's handwritten initials, and the reference to the future queen made dismissal almost impossible. Buckingham Palace entered full crisis mode. 3 response options were placed before Charles: deny everything, confirm only that transition planning was underway, or acknowledge the instrument existed while refusing to explain what it meant for Camilla. Charles pushed all 3 aside. He rejected every proposal to revoke the decree entirely. He said that retreating would make the future crown appear negotiable and invite every wounded faction to challenge William's authority the moment he took the throne. Meanwhile, Camilla sat alone, watching a television presenter speak Catherine's name, describe her as the monarchy's undisputed future female leader, and watch millions of people across Britain absorb that framing in real time. She reached for the remote, and then she stopped, because part of her needed to hear how quickly the country was accepting what she was losing. These private meeting. And then Catherine did something no one expected. She asked to meet Camilla privately, without Charles, without William, without secretaries, lawyers, or advisors of any kind. The palace warned both women against it. Both of them accepted anyway. Catherine arrived at Clarence's house and found Camilla waiting beside an untouched tray of tea. Neither woman spoke for several seconds. One had been named the monarchy's future. The other had been told her place in that future was gone, and they faced each other without any institutional language to hide behind. Catherine spoke first. "I did not come here to take anything from you." What followed, according to accounts of their private, unrecorded conversation, was one of the most honest exchanges in the modern history of the British royal family. Camilla asked whether Catherine felt relieved. Catherine answered with painful honesty. The document had turned a distant duty into an unavoidable destiny. It had tied her elevation directly to Camilla's public loss. She felt frightened, not victorious. Camilla studied her closely, and she recognized something in the woman before her. This was not a conqueror. This was someone who understood the cost of the position she was inheriting. Camilla then admitted what the conflict had always truly been about. Not authority for its own sake, but proof. Proof that she had finally been accepted. That the decades of controversy, rejection, and public hostility had not permanently defined her. Future influence inside William's household had represented the final verdict. The closing argument that she had earned her place in royal history. Losing it made her fear that history would reduce her entire story to scandal. Catherine revealed that she had privately asked Charles to protect Camilla's charitable work, her personal dignity, and her place within the history of his reign. She had specifically requested that no palace announcement use words like punishment, defeat, or expulsion. Camilla lowered her eyes. She acknowledged that challenging Catherine before William and the staff at Windsor had crossed a line. She apologized not for fearing irrelevance, but for making another woman carry that fear as though it were her fault. Before Catherine left, Camilla handed her a folded handwritten statement accepting the transition. She asked her to place it directly into Charles's hands before the palace addressed the country. Walked into that room as rivals defined by a royal crisis. They walked out as something that does not have a simple name, but that the palace and the country desperately needed them to become. The announcement and the aftermath. By sunrise, the secret document no longer belonged to the palace. It belonged to every breakfast table, television studio, crowded street corner, and phone screen across the United Kingdom. Buckingham Palace issued the formal statement. Charles had approved a long-term continuity framework defining the responsibilities of the next king and queen. The wording carefully avoided the word removal. But the meaning was unmistakable. Camilla would retain her dignity, her residence, her financial security, and her recognition within the history of Charles' reign. But she would hold no automatic governing role inside William's future household. Broadcasters called it the clearest royal transition decision since Charles himself became king. And outside Buckingham Palace, in the rain, two women stood holding photographs, one of Catherine, one of Camilla, standing beside each other in silence. That image told the country something that no palace statement could, that this story contained grief as well as hope, loss as well as continuity, and that the British public felt both at once. The final gathering. That evening, Charles summoned all three of them for one final private meeting. No cameras, no advisors, no unsigned papers, just a father, a son, a daughter-in-law, and a wife, sitting together with the full weight of what had happened between them. Charles told them the Crown Continuity Instrument would remain permanently in force. He told Catherine that her future queenship would be defined by undivided authority, strategic leadership, and a modernizing mission that the next reign required. He told Camilla that her dignity, her security, and the recognition of her service would be protected for life. And then he turned to his wife and admitted, in the private recorded account preserved for the Royal Archive, that signing the document had caused him profound personal pain. Love, he said, could not require the monarchy to remain structurally uncertain. Camilla answered that she understood. Though understanding, she reminded him quietly, did not make the loss painless. Catherine promised that her queenship would never be built on Camilla's humiliation. She would acknowledge the work the queen consort had performed. She would respect the boundaries. And she would not allow the history of this moment to be written as a story of one woman destroying another. Camilla looked at her and accepted the promise. William lifted the signed instrument from its folder, read the closing paragraph in silence, and returned it to his father. Charles closed the folder, fastened the seal, and placed it inside the transition box, the protected container holding the instructions for the next reign. That simple gesture ended the argument. Catherine would shape the monarchy's destination. Camilla would remain part of its history. And Charles had made his choice with eyes fully open. He chose the institution over personal loyalty. He chose clarity over sentiment. He chose a future queen's authority over a queen consort's comfort. And he did it, knowing exactly what it would cost the woman beside him. History will judge whether this was wisdom or ruthlessness. The British public is already debating it. And the royal family will live with the consequences of this document for generations. But perhaps the most extraordinary part of this entire story is not the decree itself. It is what happened in that quiet room at Clarence House between two women with no cameras present. Because Catherine and Camilla could have let this destroy everything. Instead, one of them walked through a door, sat down beside an untouched tray of tea, and said 5 words that changed the entire atmosphere. I did not come here to take anything from you. That is the line that will define this era of the monarchy. Not the signature, not the legal language, not the 11 words that escaped into the media and detonated across the country. 5 words, spoken woman to woman, without witnesses, without a script. That is the moment the future of the British crown was truly decided. If this story moved you, shocked you, or left you with questions, drop them in the comments right now. Tell me whether you think Charles made the right call. And if you are not subscribed yet, now is the time, because the story of what happens next inside the royal family is only just beginning.